For 30 years, betting against Japanese government bonds was the quickest way to ruin your career. Traders shorted them. Economists repeatedly predicted disaster. Analysts warned that Japan's massive debt load would eventually explode. Yet Japan defied them all. The country piled up debt worth more than 240% of its GDP, kept interest rates near zero, and still managed to lend trillions of dollars to the rest of the world. Every time someone called for a crisis, the crisis never came. But now something is changing, and it's changing fast. Bond yields in Japan have surged to levels not seen since 2008. The yen is falling rapidly, and Japan's new prime minister has responded by issuing another $135 billion in debt, pouring fresh bonds into a market that already looks stressed. So the question becomes unavoidable: if the world's largest creditor nation begins to weaken, what happens to all the borrowers that depend on it? Sanae Takaichi is Japan's new prime minister. She won a close internal contest, took office with bold promises, and immediately began pushing a more aggressive version of the strategy once known as Abenomics, but where past leaders at least pretended fiscal consolidation would happen someday. Takaichi doesn't bother with the illusion. She wants spending now, growth now, and borrowing now. Her first big act was approving a massive stimulus package worth more than 20 trillion yen. The money goes toward energy subsidies, household support, payments to families, and a long list of strategic investments in artificial intelligence, semiconductors, national defense, and industrial resilience. When reporters asked how she would pay for it, she answered directly: Japan would issue more bonds. That simple statement hit the bond market like an earthquake. Investors already worry about Japan's finances. On paper, the country has the highest debt to GDP ratio in the developed world. Some argue that the net debt ratio is lower, closer to 140% once public assets are subtracted. That's better, but still enormous. And even at past low yields, interest payments have been consuming a quarter of the government's annual budget. With higher yields, that burden only grows heavier, and yields are rising quickly. The 10-year Japanese government bond recently topped 1.8%, and the 40-year bond hit a record high above 3.7%. If you live in the United States or Europe, those numbers might sound modest, but for Japan, which has operated under near zero rates for decades, these are seismic shifts. For a generation, Tokyo was able to borrow almost for free. That era is ending, and instead of tightening belts, the government is borrowing even more, creating a situation economists call fiscal dominance. Fiscal policy overwhelms monetary policy until the central bank has no independent room to maneuver. This brings us to the Bank of Japan, which is caught in an impossible position. Officially, the central bank is independent. In reality, it is trapped between a government that wants cheap borrowing and a currency that is plunging in value. Governor Kazuo Ueda has tried to move very slowly toward normalization. He has raised interest rates from negative levels to 0.5%, the highest since 2008. But inflation in Japan is running at about 3%, which means real interest rates are deeply negative. Savers are losing purchasing power, import prices are rising, and yet Veda has refused to hike aggressively because doing so would dramatically increase the government's borrowing costs. Markets see the contradiction. Typically, when a country's bond yields rise, its currency strengthens because investors earn higher returns. In Japan's case, the opposite is happening. Yields are going up while the yen keeps falling toward 158 per dollar. When both move in the wrong direction at the same time, it suggests the market is losing confidence. Japanese officials have hinted at more currency intervention, but interventions only provide temporary relief. Japan already spent more than $60 billion trying to defend the yen last year, and the effect wore off after a few months. The real driver behind the yen's weakness is the enormous gap between Japanese and US interest rates. As long as the Federal Reserve maintains high rates and Japan stays near zero, global investors will continue borrowing yen cheaply and investing the proceeds in higher yielding foreign assets. This is the famous yen carry trade, one of the most influential forces in global finance. To understand the danger here, we need to revisit what happened in the summer of 2024. The Bank of Japan made a modest rate hike only to 0.25% and hinted it might reduce its massive bond buying program. That tiny adjustment triggered chaos. The Nikkei stock index dropped more than 12% in a single day, its biggest fall since 1987. The yen surged 8% in less than a week. Global fear spiked, US stocks fell, Bitcoin and Ethereum plunged 20% within hours. None of those markets had anything to do with Japan directly. What they had in common was leverage funded in yen. When the yen suddenly strengthened, the carry trade inverted and margin calls rippled across the world. The BOJ panicked. Within days, a deputy governor promised no further rate hikes during volatile periods. The message to markets was clear: if things get shaky, the BOJ will step back. That calmed speculation temporarily, but it also signaled weakness, and although some carry trade positions were unwound, many survived. By the end of 2024, speculative yen shorts were rebuilt. Goldman Sachs and Nomura have both warned that a second carry trade unwind is a major global risk for 2026. But the carry trade is just the fast moving part of the story. The slow moving part is bigger, more powerful, and potentially more dangerous. Japan is the world's largest creditor nation. It holds $3.7 trillion in net foreign assets. Japanese life insurers, pension funds, and institutional investors have spent decades buying foreign bonds because domestic yields paid nothing. They accumulated more than $1 trillion of US treasuries alone, but today Japanese 30-year bonds yield more than 3.4%. Meanwhile, US treasury yields fall below 1% for Japanese buyers once hedging costs are included. Suddenly, keeping money in Japan is more attractive than sending it abroad, and institutional investors are already moving. Major insurers like Daiichi Life and Nippon Life have announced plans to reduce their foreign bond holdings and increase purchases of long maturity Japanese bonds. Several smaller insurers have followed suit. This shift sets off a powerful feedback loop. When Japanese institutions sell US treasuries, US yields rise, higher US yields strengthen the dollar, a stronger dollar pushes down the yen, a weaker yen makes inflation worse in Japan, which pressures the BOJ to consider tightening. If the BOJ tightens, Japanese bond yields rise further, making Japanese bonds even more attractive relative to foreign ones, and that encourages more repatriation. It is a slow grinding loop that pulls capital back to Japan. Unlike the carry trade unwind, which unfolds over days, institutional repatriation unfolds over months and years, and it quietly drains liquidity from global financial markets. Where does this end? There are four broad possibilities. The first is the limp along scenario. The BOJ continues hiking very gradually. The yen stabilizes somewhere around 150 per dollar. Inflation cools. The carry trade unwinds slowly instead of exploding. Nothing gets fixed, but nothing collapses either. Many analysts consider this the most likely path, though it requires conditions to remain stable globally. The second path is real reform. Japan could raise taxes, restructure its social programs, and put its public finances on a sustainable trajectory. This is what the International Monetary Fund recommends, but in Japan's political environment, reform is nearly impossible. Takaichi leads a minority government. Her coalition partners want tax cuts, not hikes. Voters expect benefits, not austerity. Real reform is unlikely without a major crisis forcing the issue. The third path is a disorderly adjustment. The yen could crash past 170. Japanese bond yields could spike beyond sustainable levels. The carry trade could unwind violently again, like it did in August 2024. But this time, the BOJ might not be able to reassure markets. Global contagion could spread across US stocks, emerging markets, crypto, and corporate debt. This scenario is unlikely on any single day, but not improbable over a multi year horizon. The fourth path is long term financial repression. The BOJ could cap yields below inflation by continuing large scale bond purchases. This would keep government borrowing costs low while inflation gradually erodes the real value of Japan's debt. Savers would lose purchasing power year after year. It is politically unattractive, but it may be the quiet path Japan ultimately follows because no one has to vote for it and no one has to announce it. All of this matters globally because Japan has long been the anchor of low global interest rates. Japanese savings funded US treasuries, European government bonds, Australian debts, and corporate credit markets. If Japan steps back from global markets, everyone else has to pay more to borrow. Higher yields tighten financial conditions and raise recession risks. The early warning signs are already here. Norinchukin Bank, one of Japan's biggest financial institutions, was forced to liquidate more than $60 billion of foreign assets because rising funding costs wiped out returns. If Japan's big three megabanks face similar pressures, the result could be a worldwide squeeze on credit availability. The yen itself is another transmission channel. Because it is widely used as a funding currency, sudden yen appreciation forces global deleveraging. That means sharp drops in stocks, crypto, commodities, and many emerging markets, all triggered by movements in the currency of a single country thousands of miles away. There are three key indicators worth monitoring. The first is the 30-year Japanese government bond yield. If it rises above 3.5% and stays there, fiscal concerns become serious. The second is the USDJPY exchange rate. If it breaks above 160 and stays elevated, Japan may intervene again. If intervention fails, confidence in Japan's financial management could deteriorate rapidly. The third is what analysts call the triple weakness signal. This occurs when Japanese stocks fall, Japanese bonds fall, and the yen falls all at the same time. That pattern signals capital flight. It tells you that foreign investors are leaving Japan entirely because they fear fiscal dominance and policy failure. When that happens, the BOJ may be forced into aggressive interest rate hikes to defend the currency, and that kind of shock could trigger another global carry trade unwind. For decades, Japan defied financial gravity. It borrowed beyond what seemed possible, kept rates near zero while the rest of the world hiked, and maintained stability with enormous domestic savings. But the forces that supported this unusual equilibrium are eroding at the same time. The government is doubling down on debt issuance, the central bank is cautiously raising rates for the first time in a generation, bond markets are waking up, investors are shifting capital home, and the global system is more connected to Japan's decisions than ever. When Japan moves, the world feels it, and as these pressures converge, the next big global shock might not start in Washington or London or Beijing, it might start in Tokyo. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more deep dives into the forces shaping our financial future.